thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. We definitely want to start, and I'd like to introduce Mr. Russell Lancaster, who is going to take us through this exciting program. And because I know most of you, and I know you know Russell, there really is not much more I need to say. But Russell, please, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. And I would like to, of course, use this opportunity to tell you how much we are pleased at having you here this afternoon. Honorable Ministers of Government, members of the Parliament, former ministers, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the author, Moses Nagamootoo, and his family, I would like to extend warm words of welcome. It is indeed an honor that you have taken the time to be with us this afternoon, and I trust that the proceedings will prove integral to your understanding of the author's purpose. We truly appreciate your presence here. You know, Kathy, it was on your wall that I saw that Mahatma Gandhi quote for the first time, and I quote his words here: "You must be the change you want to see in this world." A statement that aptly describes Moses Nagamootoo. Author, teacher, politician, lawyer, elder statesman, and most notably, former Prime Minister of Guyana from 2015 to 2020. The man who has invited us here this evening to celebrate with him his latest achievement, the book that is being launched, Dear Land of Guyana. One in a series of publications, including works of prose, essays, and poetry. In fact, I'm reminded of the words of Winston Churchill, who once said, "History will be kind to me, for I intend to write it." Indeed, today we witness the power of one individual's pen to shape the narrative of our nation's story. And in a fitting start to today's program, I will invite award-winning actor Mark Luke Edwards to regale us with a poem from one of Moses's books, Paintings in Poetry, published in 2023. The poem is of the same title and was written to express the poignancy of living in colder climes while reflecting on the homeland. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together. Mark Luke Edwards.
Paintings in Poetry. Though I am enchanted by its beauty, I find no expressions in poetry to celebrate the soft light before dark, when the serene sunset sends scenic sparks. I see rhythm in a dance of colors. Curvaceous silhouettes replace nude trees like sentinels on terrestrial canvas in the sky, like paintings in poetry. During these enchanting evenings of fall, creeping coal is changing trees, small and tall. Contrasting colors blend in harmonious rhyme. This stunning season, eve of wintertime. Silence in the woods is broken by fallen leaves. Fluttering butterflies, cheerful dancing, sprayed in gold by glittering sunlight, like chunks of polished diamond falling. Iowa's summer sunset, softly sublime, rekindles life in my own tropical land. Pristine, pure, fresh air, virgin forests divine. My Guyana and my Caribbean islands. The lush, rich foliage is our green lungs, gift to humanity to live healthily. But toxic polluters ravage our planet, sowing sinister strife and climate catastrophe. Carbon makers are destroying Mother Earth, poisoning us with deadly greenhouse gases. Fires rage, land cracks, snow melts, and floods erupt. Lowlands succumb to painful, tragic losses. No silhouettes of trees or birds will adorn tomorrow's ghastly, ghostly paintings in red. No romantic poetry will ring or sing from burnt ashes, charred skeletons of the dead. In infernal paintings of the crude crimson glow of death, human beings will be the falling leaves, gasping for breath. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Following that captivating prelude, we'll be privileged to gain insights into the man behind the words. And I think we could find no one more capable of offering us insights into the life and experiences of Moses Nagamutu than his daughter, Angela. She herself is an accomplished and erudite communicator, and her intimate knowledge and profound understanding of Moses' journey will undoubtedly enrich our appreciation for this publication and the stories it holds within its pages. Please join me in welcoming to the podium Angela Nagamutu Joseph.
Thank you, Russell. Esteemed guests, family, friends, ladies and gentlemen, I have been tasked to do a simple presentation tonight because I know Russell said I'm going to give a very detailed insight into this man we call Moses Nagamutu. My dad, I call him Dad. He needs absolutely no introduction, at least not in Guyana at least. He is the center stage personality this evening as the author of the books at this launch. I was born a year after my dad became a journalist, so it didn't take long before I shared his life in the newspaper world. In Bel Air, where I grew up, the neighbors referred to me as the newspaper girl. My dad has always had a passion for reading and writing and loves to share this passion with others. And this is how I became the newspaper girl, by distributing the Sunday Mirror in our neighborhood. That's the newspaper that my dad wrote for at the time. So I know firsthand the passion that Dad has for writing. Although over the years he became a lawyer, a member of parliament, a minister of government, and most recently, Prime Minister, his love for writing did not fade. The articles that he wrote for the local and foreign press and social media would fill volumes. He has earned great recognition and respect, including an honorary doctoral degree in letters. But a pride of place in his study is a scroll of honor for outstanding journalism bestowed on him by the International Organization of Journalists, in which he served once as the vice president. A fisherman's son, he has since written literally a basket of books. It was a joy to see my dad writing again in the last 3 years at our home in the United States, where, of course, my siblings and his grandchildren were able to enjoy some quality time with him. During that time with us in the United States, Dad has completed several manuscripts. 3 of these are still being published. I am therefore pleased to introduce to you this outstanding writer, my dad, who is here to give you not only an insight into his life and career, but his dreams for his dear land of Guyana. Ladies and gentlemen, I present the Honorable Moses Versame Nagamutu.
Yeah. As we prepare to immerse ourselves in the writings of this author, we will welcome to the podium Cassandra Alls, who has kindly agreed to read an excerpt from Moses' book of essays, Radical Roots. She's an attorney at law who holds a Master of Laws degree from Dalhousie University with an emphasis on health law, ethics, and policy. She has extensive public health experience in areas such as HIV, sexual and reproductive health, ethics, tobacco control, and food policy. Please listen as we note how these writings weave together the threads of history, identity, and belonging that unite us as a nation. Cassandra Alls.
Radical Roots, Selected Essays on West Indian Politics by our dear Moses V. Nagamutu. So this book is very interesting. It traces his radical roots and the radical roots of politics in the Caribbean. And I want to talk about two interesting stories from parts 2 and 3, dealing with the Grenadian Revolution and the Army Revolt in Suriname. So in relation to Grenada, just before the demise of the Grenada Revolution, a caucus of Caribbean left-wing leaders met in Grenada. I was among those who held discussions with Maurice Bishop and other key leaders. Bishop explained that to prevent Grenada from isolation, the government had to embrace the progressive nationalist policies of the Caribbean community, not a radical communist-like posture. He assured that that was a position that Cuba understood and embraced. But it was evident that a faction of ultra-left hardliners in the new dual movement saw Bishop as being too moderate. The faction subsequently placed Prime Minister Maurice Bishop under arrest. I assisted Chetty Jagan, once described by Bishop as the Dean of Caribbean Socialists, in last-minute efforts to lead a team of mediators to speak with the dissidents among the Grenadian leaders. I spoke with Commander Desi Bouterse and Professor James Millett, Suriname and Jamaica, who agreed to join JAGA on a critical mission to Grenada. I unsuccessfully tried to contact Dr. Trevor Monroe, Jamaica, who had close relations with Grenadian leaders. That mission, however, was aborted when news broke that Bishop was executed, along with several government ministers, including the well-known foreign minister, Unison Whiteman. A week after Commander General Hudson Austin foisted himself as the new leader in Grenada, the United States invaded the island on October 25, 1983. I was a correspondent then for Radio Free Grenada, and mine was perhaps the last voice heard on that outlet before it was destroyed by US bombs as President Reagan brutally buried the remains of the Grenada Revolution. And then about the Army Revolt in Suriname. When the Army seized the government in Suriname, the neighboring Dutch-speaking republic, on February 25, 1980, that was the first successful military revolt in the sub-region that later became the Caribbean community. Separated by a language barrier, news trickled in the Caribbean about the event in Suriname. It immediately raised an issue of definition. Was it a coup? Was it a revolution? I hastily traveled to the next door state to find out. Accepting the definition of a coup d'etat as a violent change of government, and revolution as a change in the whole basis and structure of society, I arrived at a conclusion from available empirical data that February 25, 1980 in Suriname was a coup, which had revolution as its major goal. It was an army revolt led by non-commissioned officers who raised that promise of a revolution as its banner. It was a lightning coup. It was over even before people knew what was happening. Guyanese journalist Alex Waldron, who accompanied a Berbice cricket team that included legendary former West Indian captain Rohan Kanai and star players Joe Solomon and Len Baichan, said that he was told by a bus driver that the gunfire he had heard on the morning of February 25 was the sound of squibs, which the people were in the habit of setting off. Most of the population in Paramaribo appeared not to have known what was going on, and Naikeri was calm.
The jump from legal luminary to literary critic is not as far-fetched as one would imagine, because what both have in common is an intimate understanding of language and the subtleties that underlie its expression. As such, I think we have in our next speaker the ideal exponent to perform the task of providing us with a personal viewpoint of his interaction with the words contained in the book being launched today. It therefore pleases me enormously to invite C.A. Nigel Hughes, my schoolmate, friend, and legal advisor, to the podium to offer from his unique perspective a review of the book, Dear Land of Guyana.
It's evident that Russell's legal advice is very questionable. Honorable Moses Nagamutu, members of the government, members of the opposition, leaders in society, good evening, and thank you. I don't pretend for a second to be a literary expert. What I do know for sure is, like you, I'm a Guyanese. And like you, I am tortured by the history of our country. The good thing about this book is that Moses didn't call it, like the South African equivalent, Cry the Beloved Country. He called it Dear Land of Guyana. And my first encounter with Moses, when I was a student during the difficult times of the late 70s in Guyana, was that I thought that he was our Che Guevara. He wore the Che Guevara hat, he was exceedingly radical, he had that sort of emotion. One of the most important things about our country, it's still young, is that you have to write your truth, because collectively, wherever you come from on the spectrum, unless you write your truth, the rest of us will never get your perspective of what was going on. Quite often we get caught up because we see only our horizon without appreciating that there are other horizons. And this book by Moses, which I very, very highly commend, captures a man who, one, was a faithful member of the People's Progressive Party led by Cheddi Jagan. He was a faithful follower of Dr. Jagan at a very critical time in our life, a very critical time in the country's life, when Guyana was becoming independent and the talk was about a new society. And a lot of the discussions and debates that went on in that time was, how do you create and fashion a new society? And Moses was part of that. That was an era when the world was divided into two separate and very distinct ideological centers. And Moses was in one camp. As a matter of fact, in Guyana, both of our parties were on the left of that ideological center. And in this book, he begins to chronicle what happened then. But most importantly, for me, how does a man who started his political life in that radical left of center with all the discipline that goes with being a party member, the fact that you have to toe the party line, migrate over the period of 3 to 4 decades to leaving the party that in effect birthed him becoming a member of a party, quote unquote, that had no specific ideology, the AFC, and then rising to the post of prime minister, where he could actually influence some of the change. During those 3 decades, the world changed tremendously. Berlin Wall came down. The world ideology was not as important to development because we all became market economy countries in different variations. And one of the essences of this book is that Moses captures that from his perspective as he goes forward. When he got to the AFC, it's an interesting little extract that I'll read, he comments briefly about what I would say is perhaps their lack of clear ideology, and I mean political ideology. And I quote, he says, "Up until then, I had no clear idea about the ideological orientation of the party, but treated as acceptable its embrace of, quote, liberal democracy. That included at the party level unlimited freedom to criticize leaders and policies." It's a very interesting and contemporary position. "And a policy program for a mixture of an open economy and a welfare state. That I felt could do for me, having run from the older People's Progressive Party, which was doctrinaire and dogmatic and abused democratic centralism to foist upon the rank and file one-man autocratic rule. I suspected, however, that through the tissues of their liberal democracy ran a streak of anti-communism, as I got an early rebuke for using the label comrade to greet one of the Washington boys. Quote, we don't use that communist term here. Interesting that Moses would come from a party in which the 2 major parties both referred to their colleagues as comrade into what I suppose one would probably call, and this is not my description of it, a liberal democratic semi-bourgeois party, and to become one of its leading candidates. The book consists of 25 chapters, and I was a little shocked when I looked at the title of the first one. It was called Return to Sophia. I didn't know that he was in Sophia in the first place, but of course, my natural instincts went to the PNC party headquarters, forgetting completely that Moses lived in Sophia, but North Sophia. The first 7 chapters, and each chapter has a very poignant definition of the aspects of his political life, more contemporary political life that he deals with. Commences with Return to Sophia, it then goes to the recount, then to foreign intelligence again, and that is a very interesting point because one of the themes that keeps coming up in Guyana's political history is the extent to which there's foreign intelligence is just that whoever that intelligence influences at the given time that changes. Pendulum of Power, the Magnificent Seven, Exposure and Engagement, and then the 10 Commandments. Part 2, Chapter 8, Pro-Democracy Alliance, the Cummingsburg Accord, the Alliance Triumph, Chetty Jagan's Legacy, the Coalition Takes Office. Part 3, and this perhaps is from the AFC's perspective the most difficult, the Government at Work, Patterns of Progress, Sugar's Sour Story, and I do commend reading that because, as you know, Moses' history started with the sugar workers and their struggle. He was very passionate and remains very passionate about the struggle of the sugar workers, the difficulties that they face, their denial of basic human rights and equal economic history, parity, and the fact that he was part of an establishment that actually closed 3 or 4 of the factories. It's in there, it's historic, it's accurate, and you need to read it. I'd like to encourage you to do that. And the final chapter in part 3, in chapter 16, is The Coalition Has Fallen. Part 4, Campaign and Elections, Regime Change and Betrayal, Back to the Beginning, Saga of a Woman's Struggle, and that deals with the women's struggle in the sugar industry, Return to the Authoritarians, Racism and revenge politics perhaps will always be relevant to our history, the new normal. And the final part 5 has the way forward and the crooked selection process. What comes through in this book as you read it is that back in the 50s, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, all the way through to now, Moses was searching in his political development for finding a way for joint participation. And I will leave you with an extract from an interview that Yesu Prasad had with him on a program called Eye on the Issues. Those of you who remember way back in the day, Yesu Prasad, of course, of blessed memory. Yesu Prasad actually had a program called Eye on the Issues. And this response that I will read to you is in response to a statement made by Yesu Prasad where he said, "The cooperatives are dead." Moses Nagamootoo, and I quote, "I wouldn't use that term. It is not potent. It is not well organized." So the point is that now we are not dealing with ideological issues. We are dealing with the issue of social cohesion. Our people are our greatest resources, and therefore you couldn't run a state where half of the people feel that they're inside and the other half feel that they're outside. Exclusion is not the way forward. It is not the way of the future. Inclusion is. And if you accept that as a praxis, as a truism, you will do everything that it takes, including experimenting in forms of government that are bipartisan and multi-party to achieve national unity. You might well arrive at a situation where if the PPP, which is the stronger of the parties, unfortunately or is an unlikely event does not get 50% of the vote, it must work with the other party or parties to get its program going, to get approval for its budget, and therefore it requires functional cooperation. So if you could look forward to such cooperation, why don't you, er propori, formulate it, not wait for it to be a necessity or wait for a necessitous occasion when you must have unity. Ladies and gentlemen, I commend this book to you highly. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. One sometimes forgets that Moses does not only write political books. As a matter of fact, there's a little book he's written called Like Scattered Seeds, a rib-tickling collection of short stories about people scattered like seeds all over the world and far from Guyana, their homeland. We'll now hear as Katie Ali reads from one of these pieces. 17-year-old Katie is a former student of Queen's College and is currently pursuing a degree in psychology at the University of Guyana. Ladies and gentlemen, Katie.
Good evening, everyone. Before I begin to read my extract that I chose, I would like to tell you why I chose it. When I first picked up this book, I had no intention to read it fully. I just saw it and I asked about it. And I was told to have a go at it. And after reading the first 3 pages, the extract I selected, I could not put it down. It had me in such a firm grasp, I had to finish the entire book before I left where we were. And so I'll begin. I landed at JFK Airport, feeling tired and fatigued. My dizziness didn't come from working all night at my Georgetown home before hurrying out to the airport. It came from not being able to rest or sleep during the flight. I sat next to a pandit who was chanting verses in Hindi as our plane was taking off from Guyana. After we had taken our seats, Guruji confided to me that he did not like to travel in airplanes, which made him nervous. To keep him from falling asleep throughout the 6-hour flight, he recited and hummed verses from the Ramayana and the Bhagavad Gita. I saw him again after we cleared the immigration area and were in the arrival lounge. A group of Indo-Guyanese had gathered around him, some waving their hands at me while others were placing garlands around their guru's neck. A few of them bowed at his feet. As I exited, I was received by a government official who came to give me a ride in a long, sleek, black vehicle. I told him politely that it would not be necessary for me to travel with him. I'm going right here in Queens, to my daughter's house, I explained, as he was insisting that he must give me a ride. Just then, I heard a shout, "Moses, adehe!" I looked in the direction from where the voice had come, and I saw a dark, squatty man, about my age, standing beside a yellow cab. "Ha!" I exclaimed to the consulate official. "My ride has come. Thank you for coming, and I'll see you tomorrow at this address." I handed him a piece of paper with the name and address of my daughter. I walked towards the cab, dragging my suitcase and a carry-on bag, one in each hand. "I's Guyanese, you cousin, Baba Man's son." He told me the name of his father and the village from where he came. He was speaking non-stop, words shooting out like bullets from a submachine gun. "We is Madras family," he added. "Oh yes, I remember you." He grabbed me in a big bear hug and informed me that he operated a taxi service. He took my suitcase and threw it in the passenger's back seat. "You go ride with me in the front seat. Don't worry, no charge today. Use me minister cousin. I taking you to Peter House. Your brother and me is close," he said, without even asking where I was going. "I gonna drive through Liberty and let the fellas them see who I got here." I told him that I was going to my daughter's house and gave him the address in Richmond Hill, Queens, where my brother also lived. "I know, all we got brothers, sisters, and picnic here. We like scattered seeds now," my cousin said as he clapped my back with his right hand, his left on the steering wheel of his left-handed drive. Scattered seeds. It struck me that Guyanese were scattered not only in America, but all over the world. Often one heard people saying that there were more Guyanese living outside than inside Guyana, the last in the chain of former British colonies in the Caribbean and the only English-speaking country on the South American continent. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen. And that's what we've had you doing all afternoon. But now it's your time to speak. These words are emblematic of a man who has never ceased to fight for national unity and who has struggled to ensure that this is achieved in his dear land of Guyana. You heard earlier of his life and work, and now we get to hear, as he tells us himself, of his vision for a unified Guyana. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's stand as we welcome to the podium the Honorable Moses Nagamutu.
Thank you, Russell. Friends, my colleagues in government, former ministers and members of parliament, my colleagues in the media, journalists. I see now they're under tremendous attack in the land of my ancestors, India. One person referred to them as the Godi press, and as prostitutes. I take strong objection to the use of words that would smear the character of our colleagues in journalism, but it's a good job. I've had my taste of it, and in fact, as Angela said, it has been the backbone of my literary character, if I may say so, and this impetus to to write and to keep writing. I want to first of all thank my daughter and her husband for hosting this event. I have never been willingly a sponsor of book launches, and which is the reason why you will see what she described as a basket of books out there, not having had the exposure as this book is now having of being formally launched. I also want to thank my children overseas. They have accommodated me in the last 3 years invariably, in and out, in their sitting rooms, in their kitchens, writing day in, day out, and more importantly, they took me around various states in the United States that I had wanted to revisit. And for those of you who don't know, to retrace my own roots in what Cassandra described as the radical roots in the Black Power movement, the United States civil rights movement. It was a fantastic experience to go back to the place where Martin Luther King was assassinated and to draw back from my memories and my own participation in revolutionary movements in the Caribbean. Initially, quote unquote, the Black Power movement in the 70s, when I traveled around with Stokely Carmichael and Rosie Douglas, and in fact went on some of the islands, very much convinced that we had a mission to change things around in the Caribbean. I want to thank my wife, Sita, the person who constantly encouraged and facilitated me to write and has this fantastic patience to know that I'm locked away in the same house, in the same place, and perhaps we have scheduled meetings, if I may say so. But it didn't bother her once she knew I was doing what I said I would do. She was comfortable with that, and she gave me all the support. The idea, of course, for this launch has come from Cathy Hughes. The moment I mentioned to Cathy that I got a book out, it was up on Amazon, her first response while I was in Iowa, she said, well, I can't wait for us to do the launch. And launch was like a word, you know, it looks so huge to me. It's something that would terrify me to know that I'm doing a launch of something that is personal, because that's how I saw it. Eventually, like, you know, it's a self-glorification. And it digested on me that actually it was not about me. It was not personal at all. This was an experience that has been shared with so many people. It has been a dream that has not only been shared, but a dream for which so many people live. And they are guided by some of the things that force me into writing is to keep hope alive, to know that we can get out of our difficulties. As Nigel said, it is my truth. But it is a truth that comes out of profound experiences, and the mistakes that were associated with those experiences would be a guiding light for others, not to be guided simply by their successes, but by the learning that comes from mistakes and experiencing those mistakes. And I think that when I examine the the content of what I have written, I've always come to the conclusion, and perhaps more recently so, is that if all of us were to revisit our past and not just remain there, revisit the past and to step out of it and come into the present, we could all recognize our mistakes, and we could all place our experience of those mistakes under the glare of the bright new present sun. And we could harness that experience to take it into the future so that we can build something that is worthwhile, something that is new, something that will accord with all of our hopes and dreams. So I want to thank all those who have been helpful to me. I remember my son Ernesto has been beside me everywhere I go, whether I went to India to retrace my roots, perhaps not radical, but roots, and to unlock the void that had surrounded me. Who am I? Where did I come from? What is it there might have been in the ancestral past that had propelled me into the life that I had chosen, and the life that I would want to relive if I have an opportunity. If anyone has an opportunity to relive that life, I would choose no other option than to be in struggles and to be in efforts to reshape our lives and the conditions of our lives, the things that people fight about every day, that they are not comfortable with entitlements, they're not comfortable with the environment, not comfortable with their condition. These are all things that you need to find from filling a void of, and make a connectivity to establish the universality of your character. If I went to India, in southern India, Tamil Nadu, where my ancestors came from, I see the same obsessions they have with people of various cultures and background in Guyana. So my son accompanied me to some of the places I felt uncomfortable visiting alone. And one day, we thought that we were going to go to Madurai. We didn't make it, but I told him that I grew up in Wim, in the village going to the temple. And every time the ceremony is about to end, and those who were possessed of their chosen spirits would take leave, they would always say, "I'm going back to Madurai." And I found that very enticing, that in a ceremony that I have listened to, I've seen over many, many years, why do people want to go back to ancestral lands, ancestral roots? And that is one of the reasons when I wrote Radical Roots, is that I had wanted to find out what peculiar root, not what our ancestors had, we in the Caribbean, as Caribbean people, what are in fact our roots? When I go into the United States, I find talking to people, generally, even people who are in academia, that they have very little information about why the Caribbean, places like Guyana, have been dubbed communist countries, communist threats, why the British had to suspend our constitution, invaded our country with troops as they did in 1953, Grenada in 1983. And they associate you with being some different people who must be treated differently. They're a threat to democracy and all the other things that they articulate when it is convenient to do so, that they didn't understand. And I'm glad my friend TUC chief is here, Lincoln Lewis, that all had to go back to labor, the struggles of the working people for rights. And those rights evolved. The first, when people talk about the 1917 Russian Revolution, everyone thought that that was where they raised the red flag for the first time. It was in the Caribbean, in places like the Caribbean, where the flag of labor was raised long in the early 19th century. And people fought for the rights, going so far in conservative countries like Barbados, where they were calling for the expropriation of the sugar industry. They saw it as the object of their oppression, the object of their misery. And so there had been these radical roots planted in our Caribbean, from which we benefited in struggles. Later we tried to reject and or distance ourselves because it had taken an ideological appellation, socialism, communism. And so we tried to find ways and means to escape and make accommodation away from that radical tradition where the importance of the working people cannot be underestimated then and even today. Because all over, even in today's circumstances in Guyana, working people are the victims, are the object of the oppression of society. So, in a very complex way, I have decided that it must be for people like me, with all the experiences I have acquired and the roles I have played in our society and all the societies as well, to document these. But they didn't come only as prose. I do not think I could claim to be a poet. And I didn't think you could find a definition a priori of a poet that I got a degree and I'm a poet because I studied poetry. It is something that has come out of the emotions and from the very depth of feelings and connectivity with your surrounding, with nature, with people, with concerns for humanity, the planet, everything else. I had started as a very young boy, writing poems. I recall in 1966, in the Berbice Times, maybe you have heard about a newspaper called the Berbice Times. I used to write poems. And one of the poems I wrote then had almost the distinct feature of the song I heard later on, Not a Grade of Grass. And being the son of a fisherman, I can still see my protest coming out in Not One Cuirass and things like that. In the rage at the time that I felt I should express in Creole lingua, in things that people can identify with over Venezuela's aggression against us when they took over one half of Ankoko Island. And so by the time I got into the Mirror, as a journalist, I was writing poems. Mr. Janet Jagan one time described me in the PPP acronym, the party's pet poet. And I went on to participate in competition. By 1975, I won the competition dealing at a party level, we are observing an important birth anniversary of Chetty Jagan. I wrote the poem Reminiscences. These concerns that you have for nationhood, they are not just overnight. They are feelings that you have that been nurtured by the circumstances that present themselves, as I said, the one dealing with Venezuela's earlier aggression, to coming down to the point when we experienced COVID. And I wanted to find words that you could talk about the miseries of people, 6 million people having died in such bizarre circumstances. And then climate change. So one can write about these experiences, but it's not necessarily confined to one form of literary expression. And that is why I've decided to throw everything into the writing while I have time and the energy and the intellect, more importantly, the memory, that I should document and write these things. So you will see in the paintings and poetry, you'll see in like Scattered Seeds. I wish I could tell you how happy I feel meeting Guyanese, not because they are overseas, but because they are Guyanese overseas. You feel a little connection with the rest of humanity. Like one day I'm traveling in the train in Toronto, and above all the dint of the noise from the track and the wheels and so on, the train stopped and quiet. And I heard these words, "Walk good, gal." You could not, it was so unmistakably Guyanese that you felt that you were not alone. You felt Toronto must be for those foreigners. But then you realize that we are all children of the world, and we are part of it, and perhaps part owners of the world. I walked up to the lady, and there it was, I saw Auntie Finey. Not wearing dress long to she heel, or with a rumal, Madras rumal in she head. Auntie Finey got barbed up hair and lipstick and jeans and all of that. So we can change with the world, and we can change the world as well. So when I go around looking at Guyanese, you're in Paris airport. You saw a lady go up to the counter, and you don't know her. Oh, here, Miss Lady, is 50 pounds supposed to carry, right? That is what the paper said. You know that that's a Guyanese. And by the time you saw that person leave the counter, you'll see 2 boxes under the arm. Those were the days. Those were the days, many, many years ago, where the dress suddenly became bloated. 3-4 jeans all on underneath because they were being questioned about the weight. Nothing is left back. Everything is going on that flight, right? So you go into a place where the last place on earth that you would find that someone would want to deal with liquor. And I'm walking into my hotel in Aden, and you find Yemen, we came from Yemen, Aden into Yemen, North Yemen. And there was this guy in the room, and he told me, Boss, me just take on a little taste. I had walked with a half bottle Guyana rum and put it in the fridge. And he proceeded to explain to me, even before I understood what he was trying to tell me, I take a little bit in the Kark Bass. Is a Guyanese. A Guyanese that you find in a place where later, as I found out, his job really was to run the elevators with duty-free alcohol. That was his job. He worked in the hotel, and he was trafficking. So all the way around the world, we need to write, to share the experiences. They may be hilarious. You don't have to be serious all the time. To be a politician, to be a know-all, a see-all, you don't have to be that. You have to just write. When the thoughts come to you, when you want to share part of you, part of that experience that could enrich other people's lives, apart from simply enriching literary traditions, I would be part of that. I share that. And that is why I took the last 3 years trying to put together my writings. Now, finally, I have walked with some notes here that I had wanted to share with you. I wanted to read, but we're not going to do that. You'll be trying to get your copies of the book to trace all the steps that I have taken. Now I'll give you the kernel of what I've decided to write. My quest for national unity. I came from a village that still is close to Lancaster, Liverpool, Manchester, and Quarantine. Cohesion is not an option. It is what you were born into. I was delivered by Nurse Michelle Burt, and I was named by her Moses. And she gave all my siblings names also from the Bible, or at least English names. And we lived close together, Afro-Indo-Guyanese communities, particularly the Madrasis or the Tamils. And so we find that, in my experience, that we are together in this journey. And dear land of Guyana is the dear land of all of us. It is not for a situation where 50% must be in and 50% must be out, and those who are out will be in tomorrow, and those who are in must be out the next day. It's not going to happen. You're not going to build a cohesive society or a prosperous society or an enduring society if we constantly pull apart. So I've decided to write Dear Land of Guyana from going to and fro. It's not going to be one coherent reading from the womb to thereafter. It's reflections of the experiences I wanted to share. And the reflections in the book went about me being in the PPP. And I'll tell you this, some of it is painful to talk. It's painful to talk about the way we have brought our own dignity as a people down. I remember when the results of the elections in 2020 were announced. In the night, after the new president was sworn in, we saw lights, flashlights in the yard, and everybody was busy. Vehicles were driving out and so on. We got up to discover the next day there were no guards. The vehicles were all gone. Someone came to collect the keys the very next day after the government was changed to the residence, the Prime Minister's residence. And we were literally told to walk home. Now, when you arrive at the situation in a country where you lose your respect for your symbols, your respect for your leaders, your respect for your elders, it is going beyond the division of the society. It's going to the degradation of your society. The way we are losing our values, we are losing our self-respect. And so, Dear Land tried to capture at different times in the history why we must always return to this requirement, this necessity for unity, for formal unity, institutionalized unity. The division is not only negative, the division in our society is debilitating. It is eating us away and taking what is left of us. And that is very painful to document. So, Dear Land of Guyana is not a walk in the park. It is not a work of joy for me. It is what I felt was necessary to be told. What I said there might be hurtful to some people. It was not my intention. What I sought out to do was to expose what I felt are the deficiencies and deformities of our society, particularly the human level, the intellectual level, and hope that we could go forward and change that. So I'm still hoping that whatever my views would be contentious, would be controversial perhaps. Maybe I've seen it wrong, but I was entitled to the way I saw it. And I was entitled to document the way I saw it. And so I want to welcome you to my world of controversies and disputations, but I certainly would like you to share my experiences. Thank you.
There have been congratulatory messages, and I will now invite Honorable Kathy Hughes, Member of Parliament, to come and read those messages, one from Dr. Clem Sichuran and the other from Dr. Maria del Pilar Caladine.
Moses, extra special to be here tonight. This message is from Dr. Clem Sichuran, author and Emeritus Professor of History at the London Metropolitan University. Dear Brother Mo, greetings on the occasion of your very special book launch. 4 new publications and 2 revised ones. Much to celebrate. I wish to applaud you for taking the time, doing the hard work, to document aspects of your life, including your political endeavors of more than 60 years. When, as young radicals in Berbice in the mid-1960s, we were pontificating on world revolution, speaking precociously about Castro, Che Guevara, Mao, Ho Chi Minh, I could never have envisioned that you and I would become such prolific writers. It gives me immeasurable satisfaction that you have also sought to reflect on your rich life and your infinitely complex and fascinating social environment, while enhancing it through your creative imagination in prose and poetry. As a historian, I find this admirable and most valuable. One goes all the time to the official documents and the newspapers in order to reconstruct the past, while seeking to eliminate the present. But a major lacuna in our social and political history has been the paucity, indeed often a total void, of personal accounts of experiences of our outstanding people in every field. What you have done in your body of work is to set a definitive example of how we can remedy this pervasive absence of self-reflection as a vital strand of our collective Guyanese memory. Once again, Brother Mo, my heartfelt congratulations. I'm sorry I could not make it to your launch, as I certainly would have sipped a wee dram of 15-year-old Eldorado to celebrate with you. Cheers, your friend Clem. This one, as Russell mentioned, is a message from Dr. Maria del Pilar Caledon, author and associate fellow, Institute of Commonwealth Studies in London. It's an honor to write to you on the occasion of your latest book launch in Guyana regarding your beautiful novel, Henry's Cure. As you know, this book has frequently been the subject of my essays about Guyanese literature, and I've returned to it many times since its publication, always to discover something fresh in its pages. I'll never forget discovering your magical novel in that large branch of Westingstone's bookstore, Piccadilly Circus, in 2001 in London. After I read it, I called my father to babble excitedly about this incredible minority community called Madrasis, who had crossed the seas like other indentured laborers to work on colonial sugar plantations in Guyana. I love the way you portrayed them as people determined to live beyond the limits that the colonialists attempted to impose on them. You can imagine my joy when I stopped to take a breath. My father told me that his own grandfather had been South Indian. For me, Henry's Cure symbolizes everything that is important about writing the stories of people who today have become minorities. Once a copy of the novel had passed from my father to my uncles and aunts. They telephoned each other independently to reminisce about their grandfather. My father and his older brother particularly remembered attending the Kali Mai Puja as children, and I felt strongly at the time that the book had helped them not only recall this man, but to afford his life and his community a dignity that may have been absent before. For me, this is the power of a book that speaks to your experiences and your people in your language. It is the realization that you're not alone and that history is worthy of both study and reverence. As I write you this note, I look at a photo of my South Indian grandfather, Swamiti Mala, which hangs in my study. I think how grateful I am to you that you gave my father and his siblings the impetus to recall his story for me, so that I, in return, may pass it on to my own son. For people like me who grew up in the diaspora, our lives are often about negotiating familiar silences around our culture. Thanks to Guyanese writers like you, we have a literary map through which we might ultimately find our way back home. Thank you.
And in an effort to ensure that these works can be shared by all, we've invited representatives from the National Library and the University Library to accept copies of these works. I'll now invite Ms. Alison Simmons from the National Library to step forward, and we'll ask Ms. Deborah Liu of the University Library, Deputy University Librarian, to step forward. And of course, Chairman of the National Library, Mr. Pitambra Prasad, of course, who has his program literary program, please step forward, Mr. Pitambar Prasad. Former chairman. Okay?
Right now, just keep it alive.
And we couldn't have our media houses here without asking them to accept copies of these books as well. I have Ms. Michelle Abraham Ali from the National Communications Network. Could you please step forward? Mr. Dennis Chabrol of Demerara Waves. Could you please step forward? Mr. Bert Wilkinson of the Associated Press. Mr. Vishak Prasad from eNetworks. And Ms. Miranda LaRose. I'll ask us all to stand as we sing the first and last verses of our national anthem. And interestingly, it is called Green Land of Guyana. That's the name of the national anthem. Ladies and gentlemen, together. Dear land of Guyana, of rivers and plains, made rich by the sunshine and lush by the rains, set gem-like and fair between mountains and sea. Your children salute you, dear land of the free. Dear land of Guyana, to you will we give our homage, our service, each day that we live. God guard you, great mother, and make us to be more worthy our heritage, land of the free. Thank you. We'll now invite you to purchase copies of the books and have them signed by the author. God bless Guyana. Somebody is going to